Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and thank you so much for tuning into another one of our conversations at home. I do want to continue reminding everyone that we are continuing to raise funds for our COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Fund, which is working to support SAG-AFTRA members who are currently out of work due to all the closed film and television productions. So please check out the link below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. Today, we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by the incredible André Holland, who is the lead in the upcoming Netflix series, The EDDY. I wanted to just kind of start by asking how you are and how your day-to-day has been, and ever since we've been in lockdown, now that we're about 6 weeks into all of this, what's your new normal looking like?
Oh, well, thank you for asking, and thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. It's up and down, but today's okay. I got up and made a nice big hot pot of coffee, and did a little bit of gardening this morning, which is a new thing for me, but I'm figuring it out. And yeah, so all's well today.
That's amazing. I wanted to jump into talking about the show a little bit, and I wanted to start by asking you about your collaboration with Jack Thorne, who created and was writing the show, and the ways in which he was really able to help you understand in all the different elements and layers of this incredibly complex character.
Well, how would I? So yeah, I'll say this in the beginning when I first got hold of the scripts. There were parts of the character that made a lot of sense to me. And then there were other parts of the character that I didn't understand. And so Jack and I had a number of conversations about that throughout the entire shooting of the thing. And, we didn't always agree on what we were seeing or what we thought we should be seeing. But what I will say is that I learned a lot from that collaboration. And I think that where we ended up is not where either of us imagined that we would when we set out. And I hope we found a sort of happy medium. He had a lot of ideas about, and had done a lot of research and a lot of work about the creative process and about who these people are. And then, as is always the case when an actor gets involved, we come with our own ideas about who they are, so yeah, a lot of the work was just about trying to blend those two things, and I learned a lot, and I hope he did too, and yeah, I hope people enjoy what we came up with.
Yeah, what were some of those elements that just really jumped out the page and completely made sense to you about who he was as a character and a person at the beginning?
The grief made a lot of sense to me. We find out later in the show that he's lost a child, probably several years before, and it made sense to me that he was very much in the grieving cycle. I read this book called On Grief and Grieving, which really illuminated for me exactly where this guy was. And I came to the part at a time in my life where I also was going through a bit of a grieving process. So that part of it really resonated with me. I think also the creative process, being an actor myself and knowing what it's like to be deep in the throes of something, trying to make something work or make something new, and to feel like you're not getting anywhere and nobody around you understands how difficult it is. I really understood that part of it. And then lastly, I think the thing I really, really connected to was him being a Black American man who has spent most of his adult life as a sort of, well-regarded artist. In his case, he's a hugely celebrated artist, performing mostly for well-to-do people, and not necessarily for his people, and sort of feeling that disconnect between what the world has what I've created, what I've turned myself into, and where I started out, and trying to find a way to put those two things back together. I understood that very much.
Yeah, I felt like you played the grief of this character so beautifully throughout the series, and really captured the way that is something that lives with people every single day when they've gone through an experience like that. So I was really interested to hear a little bit about how you thought about that in terms of your performance and some of the details that you wanted to pull out to thread that in throughout the entire show.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, one of the things was just how he has this resistance to having anyone be close to him, so even people who love him or care about him or try to reach out, he just, it just triggers too much, and he pushes people away. So I wanted that to be there, while at the same time holding on to the fact that he really desperately wants to be a better father than he's been. You know, he wants the love from his daughter. He wants to give her love and share this time with her. But there's a wall that he keeps running into, you know. So it felt important to me to maintain that desire to connect and make that desire just a little bit bigger than the grief and the shame and all the things that he was feeling, the guilt, all of that stuff, so that it still felt like there was a forward momentum to the character, and not that he was just sitting in his feelings or wallowing in them, but that he was trying to do something about it. So yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah, and there's such a beautiful complexity between that relationship with him and his daughter, played by Amandla. And I was curious about the way in which the two of you worked together to craft that. You know, there's so many, even just nonverbal moments between the two of them, and whether that was something that came just through conversations between the two of you, a rehearsal process, or if these were just things that you found in the moment on set.
Well, a lot of it was stuff that we found on set in the moment. Damien particularly really gave us the freedom to improvise and to try some things. And Amandla is such a genius performer. She's so good. So she and I would get together and rehearse a lot offset, like, you know, at our hotel or our apartments or whatever, and really try to understand who these two people are. And we'd improvise a lot just on our own, you know. It's like, what might this relationship be like? And Amandla being from a different generation than myself, there were a lot of things that we just as human beings went like, wow, we're really far apart on certain issues, you know. And so we tried to put some of that into the characters as well.
Yeah, and there's also such an interesting, you know, perspective in all of his interpersonal relationships, given that he is heading up this club and he's leading this band and writing music for them. And so I was curious the way in which you thought about how that would inform his relationships with that entire community and group of people that he is living in pockets with, because it's its own ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that one thing I watched that really helped, that Damien put me onto, was this documentary about Thelonious Monk. Mm-hmm. And there was a particular scene in that documentary where you see him at rehearsal with his band and with these engineers who were trying to record this particular tune. And there's a volatility that comes out of Monk during that rehearsal that felt like potent and real and like maybe a little bit too far. Like you could imagine the people in the room being, and you see them in the thing being like, whoa, man, like that's a lot, you know? So that volatility was something that I wanted to lend to the character as well, particularly as it relates to as you say, his ecosystem and the people within his orbit. That he didn't feel the need to always be polite or kind when he's inside of the EDDY, inside of that place. He's the king. He knows when someone's not giving their best and when something could be a little bit better. And so he's not afraid to express that. And he'll do anything he has to do to make that person play the right note, you know, or sing the right note. So that was something that was important to me, and that I think we did a good job of holding on to.
Yeah, I also imagine that the music in the show kind of caused you to think about the way that you prepared with it completely differently, because usually when you're acting in something, it's a post-production element. It's not necessarily influencing your performance, but in this, it's really almost like it's its own character within the scenes. So how did that influence the way that you were preparing for scenes with those moments?
Oh, it was crazy. Like it was, I mean, first of all, right? Like the guy is a world-class jazz pianist, and I hadn't touched a piano since I was like 6. So, and we didn't have a ton of time to prepare. I wish I had a year or 2 years to really get into it and know what I'm doing. But given the time that we had, we spent a lot of time rehearsing at the piano. Had a couple different piano coaches who would be on set to make sure that the hand positions were right and that my shoulders weren't tense and all of that stuff. So preparing for the scenes in which there was music was especially challenging, because I'm trying to tell my brain, trick myself into believing that I can do this thing, right? Play the piano in a relaxed way. And at the same time, I can act a scene with someone while I'm playing. That was really, really, really tough. But fortunately, it's screen, so we can just do it again and again until we get it right.
It looks absolutely seamless when watching it. I also wanted to ask you about, your collaborative work with Damien Chazelle, just, his approach as a director, the environment that he would create on a set, because even just the way that he films this is such a unique and kind of almost like verite way, very different to the way that you would normally be shooting a lot of different angles and a lot of different coverage. So how did that inform things differently for you?
It was really cool for me. I mean, having worked with Steven Soderbergh, who works in a somewhat similar way in that he doesn't do all the traditional, setups. He kind of knows what he's going for and he gets it. And then we move on. Damien had a bit of that too. And so I think that lent an energy to the thing. Like we had to show up ready to go, you know what I mean? And we weren't going to get a lot of takes at things. And so we had to just get in and hit it. And that for me, coming from the theater, I love that. I love that, like, all right, game time, let's go. Kind of vibe. So that was cool. And then I think because Damien was so willing to be a bit improvisatory when it came to the shooting, that allowed me and Amandla and the other actors to be a bit, improvisational too with our work. So there were a lot of times when we would think a scene was going to go a certain way, and then suddenly Amandla would say something or I say something, and it would take a whole different tact. And then Damien would just come around and, let's get that and, do it one more time. And, we'd all end up being pleasantly surprised with what we came up with. And I think that is sort of how, jazz gets created as well. Mm-hmm. You very rarely end up where you set out going.
Yeah. How did that translate into filming on the streets of Paris? Because there's a huge number of shots where it really just feels like you were just capturing them in the moment. They're not necessarily staged with background, that it really is just that energy that exists in the center of that city.
A lot of it was that, we didn't have a ton of background. So a lot of it was just like our little crew. We go out and do the scene and whoever happened to be going by it is in the movie, you know what I mean? So yeah, there was a lot of that. There were scenes when me and Amandla were on the scooter and the bike breaks down and we're stuck in traffic and there were really people who were driving by who were frustrated that we were in the way. And so they were blowing their horns and saying all kinds of things to us. So we really, I think, used the environment that we were in to add to the show.
Yeah. Given that, he's been living in Paris for a significant period of time at the point at which we meet him, and what were some of the things that you did for yourself to make sure that you were playing this character that very genuinely feels assimilated into Paris and into the culture and just feels completely at ease the way that he walks down the street in that city?
Well, I chose to live in a place that would be the area that my character would have lived in, would live in. Obviously took French classes before, we started shooting, and then continued to take them as we went along. And I got to say, Tahar Brahim and Layla Bekti, who are incredible actors, obviously, but also just incredible people, really welcomed me in a great way. Like as soon as I got there, they invited me to this cool Moroccan restaurant, and we became friends, and they introduced me to their friends. And so I really started to feel like I had a life there. Had my gym and my boulangerie and my favorite movie theater, all the little spots. It really felt like it became my city as well. So and I think that helped a lot.
Yeah, it's also incredibly authentic in terms of the flow of language and almost that franglais where it's just even within a sentence, everyone's going back and forth between those two languages. Was that something that was always intentional, and did you always know which lines were going to be in which language, or did some of that flow on set as well?
A lot of it flowed on set. A lot of it, we were prepared for it to be a certain way, but then, there'll be times where if there was a phrase that I couldn't get out of my mouth, a vowel sound that I couldn't get right, or something in English that a French actor couldn't say in a way that was clear, then we say, okay, well, why don't we change back to French here, and then we'll switch back to English here, and then if he says that in Arabic, then it'll all make sense, So we all had to be, on our tippy toes at any given moment. But we had this woman named Danny Harricourt, and I can't say enough about her. She was our dialogue coach, and so she really helped to make sure that all the languages did flow seamlessly. And in addition to doing that work, she also is an incredible acting coach, and so she worked with a lot of us just to make sure that the story beats were all holding together. So she's genius, and without her, I don't know where we'd be.
One of the things that I was genuinely quite curious about in watching it is kind of the subtitles, which you may or may not have known too much about what that was going to look like. But the fact that a lot of the French is subtitled, but there's also moments and scenes that don't have it. So you're kind of following along, and you still have such a sense and an essence of what's happening in the conversation that's happening on screen. And if that was something that they discussed with you beforehand, and whether that informed the way that you thought about the nonverbal parts of your performance, if so.
It's a good question. No, we didn't talk about that. I didn't know, and I haven't seen it with all the subtitles in, so I don't know quite what decisions they've made about that. But no, I didn't know, and I wasn't thinking about that.
I also know that cast-wise, that some of the cast were also working, performing musicians, and you touched on this a little bit before in the similar parallels in being an actor and pursuing a creative career, and the questions that you have to ask yourself and the choices that you have to make sometimes to pursue your career. But I was interested in the time that you spent with them, if there were differences that you found between the music world and the jazz world that informed your character that maybe you hadn't experienced as an actor in your creative craft.
It's a good question. Well, I say two things, and they're kind of related to each other. When I first got there to Paris, I went to the rehearsal studios where the band was rehearsing, and I sat in on one of their sessions in the afternoon. And as soon as I walked in, the sound just hit me, and I was like, man, these cats are dope. They have clearly been like playing together for years. They sound so fluid. And then when they took a break, we all went into the little booth where they were, recording, and they played it back. And I watched each of them, and they were all like, just hated it, what they had recorded. And I later came to find out that they had only been playing together for maybe a week or 2 weeks at that point. And where they started, right, mm-hmm. for me was brilliant. Where they ended up was like on another plane, you know what I mean? And so I think, and in a short amount of time. So I think as actors, like, we're often told, well, we need time to develop these relationships. We need so much time to really sit in the characters and really develop this chemistry, right? This is a word that we hear a lot. But these musicians were able to build that sound in a very, very short amount of time. And so when I spoke to them about it, I was like, well, what is it like? Like, how are y'all finding each other? And that leads me to the second point. They all said individually, they said, it's just about listening. I said, okay, well, what do you mean? They said, well, you have to really listen to what everybody else is playing, and not just think about what it is that you want to play, and that's, as that's like acting 101, right? But the quality with which they listen, was really, really profound. And so I definitely learned or relearned some of that from them.
Yeah. I also feel like you so encapsulate the romanticism and the passion for the music, and the way that it seeps into every single element of who he is as a person, and the way that you thought about that and really wanted to capture that.
Yeah, for sure. And that to me was personal too, because I think, the music is a big part of my life. I grew up in the church in Alabama and listened to a lot of gospel music, a lot of blues and soul music. And so it was important to me that the sound, Elliotts' sound, somehow incorporated that, because Black people's contribution to music obviously is second to none, and just to culture in general.
Yeah, and I know that also career-wise, you've talked in the past about your desire to really have that opportunity to step up and to take lead roles. And so I was interested in hearing a little bit about how this really creatively fulfilled you in a new way, but also the way in which you thought about that responsibility of being the lead on set, and the way that you wanted to walk onto set each day and conduct yourself with everybody.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's when you're the leader of the show, people really look to you to set the tone, and even if they aren't looking to you, it kind of happens anyway. If you show up to work and you aren't prepared, you don't know your lines, or you're in a bad mood, or you're rude to people, well, then that kind of gives everybody license to behave the same way. And I've seen it happen that way on set. I've also seen the opposite happen, where someone like Clive Owen shows up to set and he knows his lines, my lines, everybody else's lines. He knows like what shots we're going to do. He knows everything. He's prepared to a level that's like above and beyond anything that I had experienced up until that point. And so I tried to hold on to that example to make sure that, yeah, that like I represented myself in a way that like, you know, was reflective not only of like my upbringing, but also of like the kind of artist that I aspire to be. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that thing in Shakespeare. They say when, you know, when characters speak to other characters and say things like, oh, you know, your grace, or my Lord, or whatever, that they aren't always speaking to the thing that the person possesses, but sometimes they're speaking to the thing that they hope the person will come to possess. So grace, I wanted to always carry myself with a sense of grace and gratitude and dedication and kindness. And I think that, you know, not only because of me, but I think that the set that we had as a, you know, it was partly as a result of that, was one that had those things. And we ended up having a pretty good time making the show as a result.
Yeah. It also feels externally in watching your career and the incredible projects that you've done and the characters that you've played that you've been really thoughtful and selective with what you've said yes to. And I was interested in whether that means that along the way you have kind of turned things down and how you've balanced that, because obviously, you know, you're trying to craft a career at the beginning and you're really trying to create opportunity for yourself, but also make sure that it's in line with your creative vision for yourself and where you see yourself going in the future as well as that moment.
Yeah, that's been one of the hardest things. Thank you for saying that, because, you know, it has been difficult at times, you know, to choose. And not to say that I have a plethora of things to choose from, because that ain't the truth. But, you know, you do sometimes find yourself having to make choices. And for me, I've always wanted to do things that I feel proud of and that I feel are reflective of my culture. Mm-hmm. And things that my parents can be proud of. You know what I mean? I'm not into that kind of negative stereotype stuff. I'm, you know, I don't want to be ashamed of anything that I've done. And at the same time, as an artist, I want to be challenged and I want to be pushed and I want to live up to my potential. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it's difficult to find projects that offer both an opportunity to challenge yourself and one that you can feel really good about, you know, in terms of where it sits in the landscape. And you got to make compromises sometimes, you know what I mean? But the one thing I'm not willing to compromise on and never will be is my culture, my integrity, my people, you know what I mean? Like I ain't going down that road. So I'd rather not have a career if meaning a career means shaming my community.
Yeah. And kind of speaking to what you were just saying about things that make you feel really proud and in kind of looking at your work on this show, is there a particular scene or aspect of your performance that you're particularly proud of and you really just hold close to you still from the whole experience?
There are a number of things. I mean, I think, you know, as I said in the beginning, you know, there were some challenging conversations that we had to have, you know, myself and Jack and everybody, you know, and there are a lot of small moments, particularly later in the season, that may go by people that they may not flag, but that meant a lot to me. Little things like the book that Julia's reading at the end, and the song that we choose at the end, you know, the song that they share together. That's a Duke Ellington song. The small things, you know, but that to me mean a great deal. So yeah, no one particular moment, but I think it's just a series of small things that in the end make me feel pretty proud that we were able to get some of those things in there.
Yeah. Well, every single moment of watching you on screen on this show is just such an utter pleasure and joy. And I hope that everyone watching this will tune into the EDDY on Netflix. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day and talking with us about this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the great questions and stay safe and we'll get through it.